Pushpin disclaimer. This story is a work of emotional nonfiction based on real-life events. It contains mature and sensitive themes, including emotional manipulation, betrayal of trust, and inappropriate familial boundaries. The intent of this narrative is to shed light on how trust can be abused even within close family circles, and how emotional healing can emerge from the deepest of wounds. Reader discretion is advised. This story is for mature audiences only and is not suitable for younger viewers. The wind outside howled softly as I poured myself a glass of red wine, settling into my quiet Friday evening ritual. The house was silent, just how I liked it. After years of chaos from a failed marriage and a draining job, I had finally carved out a little peace in my life. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. That's when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Jordan, my sister's son. "Hey Aunt Claire, any chance I could crash with you for a bit? Got a few interviews lined up in the city. Just need a place to sleep for a week or two." Jordan was 22, just out of college, ambitious, and charming in that way most young men are when the world hasn't quite knocked them down yet. We had always shared a warm relationship. He used to spend weekends at my house as a kid when my sister needed a break. I saw him more like a son than a nephew. Of course, I texted back without hesitation. "You're always welcome here." He arrived the next evening, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, wearing that familiar boyish grin. It felt comforting to have someone in the house again. I made us pasta, and we sat talking about everything: his job goals, the pressure he felt, his memories of my home when he was younger. As the week rolled by, everything seemed normal at first. He was polite, helpful around the house, even doing dishes without being asked. But subtle things began to catch my attention. The way he hugged me felt slightly longer than usual. His gaze lingered on my face a bit too long during conversations. Once, while watching a movie, he sat a little too close, our arms brushing lightly. I shifted away gently, pretending I hadn't noticed. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe I was just being paranoid. He was family, after all. Then one evening, after dinner, I mentioned how stiff my shoulders were feeling from working long hours at my desk. Without hesitation, he said, "Want me to help? I used to give my mom massages when she had neck pain." I paused. It felt weird, but also innocent. I mean, he was family. Maybe I was overthinking it. "Sure," I said softly, turning around on the couch. He started gently, his fingers pressing into my shoulders in a firm, careful rhythm. And for a moment, it actually felt good. I closed my eyes. But then, there was a shift. His touch changed slowly, almost imperceptibly. Something felt different. I opened my eyes suddenly and muttered, "Okay, that's enough, thank you." I stood up, brushing it off with a smile. He just nodded, saying nothing, but his eyes held something unreadable. A glint I didn't recognize. I didn't know it then, but that moment was the beginning of something I would never forget. The morning after that first massage, I tried to shake off the unease I'd felt. I convinced myself it was probably nothing, just a harmless gesture from a thoughtful nephew. Maybe I was being overly cautious, letting past experiences color something innocent. Still, a strange weight settled in my chest, a quiet whisper telling me something wasn't right. Jordan acted completely normal, laughing, offering to make breakfast, chatting about his job interviews like nothing happened. I tried to match his energy, pushing down the discomfort from the night before. But I couldn't ignore how he looked at me now, like he was watching me closely, gauging my reactions. Over the next few days, I noticed little changes. He began walking around shirtless in the mornings, casually stretching in the kitchen as I sipped my coffee. He complimented me more often, sometimes in ways that made me pause. "You look really good for your age," he said once, eyes lingering just a second too long. I laughed awkwardly, unsure how to respond. Another time, he said, "I can see why my uncle must have been crazy about you." That comment struck me. Too personal. Too intimate. I started creating distance, going to my room earlier, working longer hours in my home office. But he always found little ways to engage. He'd knock on the door with snacks or offer to make dinner. He was charming, considerate, and it made me question myself. Was I being cold? Suspicious without cause? One evening, after a long workday, I collapsed onto the couch, rubbing my neck. Without even asking, Jordan came behind me and started massaging again. I tensed. "You don't have to, it's okay," he interrupted, his voice gentle. "I just want to help." His hands worked slowly over my shoulders, firm and steady. I didn't stop him. I didn't want to believe there was anything wrong. But again, his hands drifted lower, just subtly, brushing the top of my back near my bra strap. My body stiffened. I cleared my throat. "Okay, that's good. Thanks." He stepped back, and I turned to look at him. His expression was unreadable again, calm, but with something simmering beneath. Something I didn't want to name. That night, I locked my bedroom door. I didn't sleep much. My mind played tricks on me, cycling through what-ifs and denials. I told myself maybe I was just being overly cautious, that it was a nephew trying to be helpful. But a darker part of me whispered, no. You know what you felt. And then, 2 nights later, I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of soft footsteps. My door creaked just slightly. I sat up, heart racing. Jordan was standing there. "I couldn't sleep," he whispered, barely audible. I stared at him, frozen. "You shouldn't be in here," I said firmly, my voice sharper than I expected. He hesitated, then turned and left without a word. I locked the door again. And this time I cried. Something had shifted. A line was beginning to blur, and I could feel it creeping towards something far more dangerous. The days that followed were filled with a strange and heavy silence. Jordan didn't mention that night, and neither did I. But the energy between us had shifted. It hung in the air like a fog, dense, confusing, and impossible to ignore. He had started avoiding eye contact, as if he knew he'd pushed too far. Or maybe he was just waiting for me to forget. But I didn't forget. I couldn't. Every time I looked at him, my mind flashed back to the way he stood in my doorway, his voice low, eyes unreadable. I began setting firmer boundaries. I stayed in my room longer. I kept the door locked at night. I stopped cooking for us and suggested he grab food from outside. I needed space to think, to breathe, to figure out what the hell was happening. But Jordan didn't seem to get the message, or maybe he chose not to. One afternoon, I was sitting on the couch, scrolling on my phone, when he came and sat next to me. Too close. Our knees touched. My entire body tensed, but I forced a smile. He leaned in and said, "You seem tense again. Want me to help?" I turned toward him. "No, I'm okay." He didn't back off. "Come on. Just a few minutes. You'll feel better." I didn't want to create conflict. I didn't want to accuse him outright, not yet. Not when I was still questioning myself. So I turned around, letting him start the massage. His hands were slower this time, more deliberate. And this time, they didn't stay on my shoulders. They drifted lower, his thumbs pressing gently along my spine, brushing the edge of my waist. My breath caught. I froze. "Jordan," I said, my voice firm. "Stop." His hands stilled, but he didn't pull them away immediately. Then, slowly, he stepped back. "Sorry," he mumbled. "I didn't mean anything. I was just trying to help." I turned to face him. He was looking at me with that same unreadable expression, part innocence, part something else entirely. A strange mixture of guilt and boldness. "I think you should stop touching me altogether," I said. His face shifted, the charm draining. "It's not a big deal," he muttered. "You didn't say that the other times." The words hit me like a slap. They were subtle, but manipulative. He was trying to make me doubt myself, make me feel complicit. My stomach turned. I stood up. "It is a big deal. And I'm saying it now." He didn't argue. He just walked away. That night, I cried in the shower, hot water masking the tears that wouldn't stop. I felt violated, confused, and deeply ashamed. How had something that started so innocently turned into this? I didn't know what to call it. I didn't even know if anyone would believe me. But one thing was becoming horrifyingly clear. The line had been crossed, and it wasn't going to stop unless I made it stop. A week had passed since I last let Jordan touch me. I had drawn the line clearly, but the atmosphere in the house had grown darker. He wasn't the same cheerful, helpful young man who had first arrived. He became distant, cold, even. But every now and then, I'd catch him staring. And not in a casual, familial way. There was something calculated in his gaze now, something predatory. I told myself he would leave soon, just a few more days. He had 2 job interviews coming up, and I silently prayed he'd get an offer and move out. I kept to myself, avoiding any moment that could lead to conversation. I even started locking the bathroom door, even when showering in the middle of the day. But one night, it all unraveled. It was late, well past midnight. I was reading in bed when I heard a soft knock at my door. I froze. "Claire." His voice was low, almost a whisper. I didn't respond. He knocked again, a little firmer this time. I need to talk." I got up, wrapped myself in my robe, and opened the door just enough to see his face. He looked different, intense, like he'd been drinking or was caught in some emotional storm. "I can't sleep," he said, eyes fixed on mine. "Can I come in for just a minute?" My instinct screamed no. "No, Jordan," I said firmly. "Go back to bed." But instead of stepping away, he reached forward and placed his hand on the door. "I don't understand why you're acting like this," he said, voice cracking slightly. "We were getting close. I thought you felt something too." My blood ran cold. "What?" I asked, stunned. "You let me touch you. You didn't stop me the first few times. You smiled at me. You looked at me like you wanted it." His words came fast, defensive, twisted with entitlement. "Stop," I said, slamming the door against his hand. "This is wrong. I'm your aunt. I trusted you." His expression hardened. "I'm not a kid anymore," he snapped. "We're both adults. You knew what you were doing." I shoved the door shut and locked it, my hands trembling. He didn't knock again. I stayed up the entire night, sitting in the corner of my room, knees to my chest. My heart raced for hours, playing his words over and over in my head. He had twisted everything, turned my silence into permission, my kindness into invitation. By morning, I had made my decision. I waited for him to come out of his room. When he finally did, groggy and silent, I looked him straight in the eye. "You need to leave," I said. "Today." He tried to argue. He begged. Then he got angry, slammed his things around the guest room, cursed under his breath. But I didn't care. I felt nothing but fury and disgust. By noon, he was gone. And I stood in the middle of my living room, broken and shaking, trying to breathe through the weight of it all. He was my nephew. And he had crossed the line I never thought anyone in my family would ever dare. The moment the door slammed behind him, I collapsed onto the couch, numb. I stared at the silence like it was something I could touch, thick, heavy, and absolute. He was gone. But the damage he left behind was still echoing in my chest like aftershocks from an earthquake. I didn't tell anyone right away. What would I even say? My nephew crossed the line? My own sister's son? It sounded unthinkable, even to me. But the more I tried to suppress it, the more it gnawed at me from inside. I couldn't sleep. Couldn't eat. My mind replayed everything on a loop, every touch, every gaze, every twisted word. Was it my fault? Had I been too naive? Too trusting? One night, after nearly 2 weeks of silence, I finally picked up the phone and called my sister, Elaine. She sounded cheerful, unaware of the storm I was about to drop into her world. "Hey, haven't heard from you in a while. Jordan told me he stayed with you. Thank you for that. He said you guys had a great time." My throat tightened. "Elaine, we need to talk." I told her everything, starting from the first massage to the night he stood in my doorway, to the words he spoke that shattered every boundary between us. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I was too far past crying. There was a long silence on the other end. Then she said, "Claire, are you sure?" I felt my chest cave in. "Yes, Elaine. I'm sure. I wouldn't be calling you if I wasn't." She exhaled sharply, almost defensively. This is really hard to believe. He's never done anything like that before. He's not that kind of person." My heart cracked. I thought the same thing. She hesitated. "Maybe you misread something? I mean, you were alone. Maybe things got confusing? Maybe it wasn't as serious as you think." I interrupted her, voice sharp with restrained pain. "He crossed the line, Elaine." I said no. I asked him to stop. He manipulated me. He gaslighted me. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was betrayal. She went quiet again. then softly muttered, "I'll talk to him." I knew then that she didn't believe me, not fully. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe admitting it meant accepting that her son was capable of something so wrong. We ended the call in an uncomfortable silence, no resolution, no comfort. I sat in my room afterward, staring at the wall, trying to understand how the people we love can disappoint us the most. Not just Jordan, but Elaine too. Her disbelief cut deeper than I expected. I had thought telling her would bring relief, maybe even justice. Instead, it left me feeling more alone than ever. But it also lit something inside me, a new flame. If no one else was going to validate what I went through, I would have to start by validating myself. After that conversation with Elaine, I didn't hear from her again for weeks. No messages. No calls. No questions. It was as if, by choosing to speak my truth, I had been erased. I felt abandoned. First by Jordan, who violated the sacred trust between us, and now by my sister, who chose to protect her son's image instead of acknowledging my pain. I kept replaying the moment I hung up the phone, thinking, maybe if I had worded it differently, she would have believed me. Maybe if I cried, if I screamed. But I didn't want pity. I wanted validation. The house felt different now. Quiet, but not peaceful, haunted. Every corner reminded me of something I wanted to forget. The couch where he sat too close. The hallway where he knocked on my door in the dark. The guest room where I now kept the door shut, locked and untouched. I stopped inviting anyone over. I withdrew from my friends, canceled plans, and ignored calls. When people asked how I was doing, I'd reply with a rehearsed, "I'm just really busy." But the truth was, I couldn't bring myself to tell anyone what had happened. I feared the same reaction I got from Elaine, that look of doubt, that awkward silence that comes when someone thinks you're overreacting. Eventually, the pain and isolation became too much to hold in. One afternoon, I sat down at my desk, opened a blank Word document, and began to write. I didn't think, I just poured everything out. The memories, the touches, the fear, the confusion. The moment I realized I was being emotionally manipulated by someone I considered family, writing became my therapy. Each word chipped away at the shame I had buried inside me. For the first time, I saw the full picture from a distance, and it became clearer. I was not to blame. After a few days, I decided to post the story anonymously on a women's support forum. I wasn't sure anyone would read it, but I needed it to exist in the world, even if only in pixels on a screen. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of comments flooded in, women who had gone through similar betrayals. Stories of cousins, stepbrothers, uncles, all trusted until one moment changed everything. They thanked me for speaking out. They shared their wounds, their rage, their silence. And for the first time since it happened, I didn't feel alone. It was like I had opened a door in the darkness and found dozens of others standing there, holding candles of their own. Something shifted inside me. I realized that while my pain was personal, it was not isolated. I was part of a much bigger story, a story of women who had suffered silently because they were too ashamed to speak, or too afraid no one would believe them. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was beginning to heal. Healing isn't a straight line. Some days I felt strong. Other days, I would hear a knock on the door and my heart would stop. Even if it was just a delivery. Even if I knew Jordan was long gone. But something had changed after I posted my story. The flood of responses had cracked open a new part of me, a part that refused to stay quiet any longer. I began journaling daily. Every thought, every trigger, every memory. I didn't hold back. And the more I wrote, the more I understood how deep this wound ran, not just because of Jordan's actions, but because of the silence that followed. The disbelief. The minimization. The way family will fold itself around the abuser to protect the name, not the victim. One night, I sat with a cup of tea, scrolling through similar stories from other women. And an idea sparked. What if I created a space for us? A space to speak without fear? So I did. I created an online group, private, secure, anonymous. I called it Silent No More. It was a place where women could share their experiences of boundary violations within families, something so often swept under the rug. At first, it was just a handful of members. then dozens, then hundreds. We spoke. We cried. We listened. No one questioned. No one doubted. We simply believed each other. That was the healing. One woman wrote, "I never told anyone what my cousin did. Your story gave me the courage to finally say it out loud." Another messaged me directly, saying, "I thought I was crazy, but now I know I'm not. Thank you." Each message was like a stitch in a torn fabric, weaving me back together. I wasn't just reclaiming my voice, I was giving others the courage to find theirs. One day, out of nowhere, I received a message from Jordan. It was short, cold, like nothing had ever happened. "Hey, just wondering if we could talk. Maybe clear the air." I stared at the screen for a long time. My hands shook not from fear, but from fury. The nerve. The entitlement. I didn't reply. I blocked him. Because I didn't owe him a conversation. Not after what he'd done. Not after the months of silence, the gaslighting, the pain. I owed myself something far greater, peace. I decided to pitch my story to a podcast that shared survivor experiences. They accepted. A month later, I recorded my episode under a pseudonym. It went live. And within days, thousands listened. I remember sitting in my living room, hearing my voice echo from the speakers. Calm. Clear. Brave. I no longer trembled when I said the truth out loud. It didn't own me anymore. A year has passed since the day I asked Jordan to leave. In some ways, the memory of what happened still lingers, like a scar you can't quite forget. But I am no longer defined by it. The pain that once consumed me has transformed into something else, strength. The podcast episode 1 recorded reached more people than I ever expected. Strangers wrote to me, thanking me for putting into words what they could never say out loud. A few even shared that my story inspired them to confront their own abusers or finally seek therapy. Knowing that my voice could help someone else heal made every tear, every sleepless night, feel like it had meaning. Elaine, my sister, never apologized. Our relationship remains strained. Sometimes I think about reaching out, but then I remember the disbelief in her voice, that moment she chose to defend her son over believing me. I've realized I don't need her validation anymore. Closure doesn't always come from the people who hurt you. Sometimes you have to give it to yourself. I still live in the same house, but it feels different now. I've redecorated, painting the walls a warm beige and replacing the couch where those moments happened. I reclaimed the space, turning it into something that feels like mine again. The guest room, the one he stayed in, has been converted into a cozy reading room. It's filled with plants, sunlight, and books, not shadows of the past. The biggest change, though, has been within me. I no longer avoid mirrors. For a long time, I couldn't look at myself without feeling shame, as if his actions somehow defined me. Now, when I see my reflection, I see a woman who survived something she never thought she'd face. A woman who didn't let silence win. A few weeks ago, I was invited to speak at a small women's retreat about personal boundaries and healing. Standing in front of a room full of women, sharing my truth, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. I realized my voice was powerful, not broken. My story wasn't a mark of shame, but a testament to resilience. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear that soft knock on the door in my mind. But instead of fear, I feel a surge of power. Because I know now I will never allow anyone to blur my boundaries again. As I sit on my porch this evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold, I hold a cup of tea close to my chest and breathe deeply. For the first time in what feels like forever, I feel whole. I whisper to myself, it wasn't my fault. And it never will be. And with that, I let the chapter close, not with bitterness, but with the quiet courage of someone who found her way back to herself. 67.